I don't even know how to start this honestly. I'm not even sure why I'm posting this, but I need to get it out because I seriously thought I was going to die that night. This happened about 6 months ago, and I still can't sleep right sometimes. A couple of my friends and I are into urban exploring, abandoned places, creepy buildings, all that. It's more for the vibes than anything. We usually post the pics on Insta or TikTok and call it a day. Anyway, there's this old church way out in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in Appalachia. I'm not giving exact details because I'm not trying to send anyone else there. So, my friend Josh finds this place on some weird forum. It's nicknamed the Whispering Cathedral. The name alone should have been enough to keep us away, but we're stupid and thought it'd be cool to check out. We drive for hours to get there, way past any town, and the last couple miles were just this crappy dirt road surrounded by trees. No signal, no houses, just trees. When we finally pull up, the place is straight out of a horror movie. The church is this huge, crumbling stone building with ivy crawling all over it. The stained glass windows are shattered, and the steeple is barely hanging on. Josh is hyped, but I already feel weird. Like, the air felt heavy. But we'd driven all this way, so whatever. We go inside, and it's dead silent except for the sound of our footsteps. The pews are all rotting, and there's this nasty smell, like burnt hair and meat. We find these weird symbols carved into the pews and floor. They're not crosses or anything normal, just these random shapes and patterns that look wrong. Then we find the animals, dead ones, like a pile of bones in the corner and what looked like the remains of a goat near the altar. That's when my friend Lily was like, "This isn't normal. We should leave." Josh, of course, is all, "This is sick. Let's explore more." At this point, I'm just following along because I don't want to be the buzzkill. So, we keep looking around and eventually find a staircase behind the pulpit that leads down to this basement. It's pitch black, but Josh has a flashlight, so we go. The basement is worse. It's damp, the walls are covered in mold, and the smell is even stronger. In one corner, we see this old wooden table with more carvings on it. There are chains bolted to the walls and what looks like dried bloodstains on the floor. And then we hear it. Footsteps. At first, we think it's just the sound of the old building creaking, but then we hear voices. Low, murmuring voices coming from upstairs. Someone says, "They're here." We freeze. No one's supposed to be out here. No one. Josh kills the flashlight, and we huddle in the corner, trying not to breathe. The voices get louder, and then we hear footsteps coming down the stairs. I can barely see, but I make out the shapes of people, maybe 3 or 4 of them holding candles. They're wearing these long, dark robes. One of them is dragging something heavy like a big sack. The sack makes this wet thud when it hits the ground, and I swear I see blood dripping from it. Lily starts crying, and I'm shaking so bad I can't even think straight. Josh is still trying to peek, and I want to punch him for being so stupid. One of the robed people says, "The altar is ready," and they start lighting more candles. I realize they're setting up some kind of ritual. That's when it clicks. They're not just here to hang out or mess around. They're here to do something really, really bad. We can't stay in the basement, so we start crawling toward the stairs, trying to be as quiet as possible. But then Lily knocks over this metal bucket, and it makes the loudest noise I've ever heard in my life. The voices stop. The footsteps stop. "Who's there?" one of them says. We bolt. Full-on sprint up the stairs, through the church, and out the door. Behind us, we hear shouting and more footsteps. These people are chasing us. When we get outside, it's pitch black, and we can barely see the car. Josh fumbles with the keys, and I'm screaming at him to hurry up. Just as we get the doors open, one of them steps into the light of the headlights. He's holding this massive knife, and his robe is stained with blood. We floor it out of there, flying down the dirt road, and don't stop until we're back in cell range. We never reported it. What were we supposed to say? That we stumbled into some cult's hideout? No one would believe us. But here's the thing. A week later, Josh found an article about a missing hiker in the area. They'd found her body miles from the church, and the details were graphic. I don't know what we almost became a part of that night, but I'm never going back to that place. Ever. If you're into urban exploring, just be careful. Not everything out there is abandoned. This shit happened about a year ago, and I still can't believe I'm alive to write about it. I've been debating whether to post this, but maybe if someone else reads this, they'll think twice before doing something as stupid as I did. So, for context, I live in the Midwest, not far from Gary, Indiana. If you know anything about Gary, you know it's full of abandoned places, old factories, train yards, stuff like that. That day, I was out looking for scrap metal. Don't judge me. It's a side hustle that pays surprisingly well. Anyway, someone told me about this old train yard on the edge of town that was completely abandoned. They said I could find some good scrap there, so I figured, why not? Big mistake. When I get there, the place looks exactly like you'd expect. Rusted out train cars, weeds growing everywhere, and this eerie silence that just didn't sit right. The factory next to the train yard was half collapsed, but it looked like it might have some decent metal lying around. I park my truck a little ways off, grab my tools, and head into the factory. Inside, it's dark and disgusting. The floor is covered in broken glass and trash, and the smell, like mildew mixed with something rotten. Still, I'm there for a reason, so I start poking around. I'm maybe 20 minutes in when I hear something. At first, I think it's just the wind or maybe some animal, but then I realize it's voices. Real human voices. I freeze. I wasn't expecting anyone else to be there, so I decide to keep quiet and see what's up. The voices are coming from deeper in the factory, near the train yard. I creep closer, staying behind the rusted machines and piles of junk. That's when I see them. For guys dragging something out of one of the old boxcars. At first, I think it's just junk, but then I notice the shape. It's a body. I can't tell if the person's dead or alive, but their hands and feet are tied, and there's duct tape over their mouth. One of the guys says, "Hurry up. We gotta get rid of this one before nightfall." At this point, my heart is pounding so hard I feel like they'll hear it. My first instinct is to bolt, but I know if they catch me running, I'm dead. So, I stay hidden, watching as they carry the person toward this old shed near the back of the yard. Once they're inside, I grab my phone to call the cops. Of course, there's no signal, thanks, Gary. I try to move closer, thinking maybe I can catch enough of a signal to send a text or something. Big mistake number 2. I step on a piece of metal, and it clatters across the floor, echoing like a gunshot. Instantly, the talking in the shed stops. One of the guys steps out, holding what looks like a crowbar, and starts scanning the area. "Someone's here," he says. I duck behind a stack of old pallets, trying not to breathe. The guy walks closer, shining a flashlight around. I'm about 3 seconds from being caught when one of the other guys calls out, "Forget it. We need to move." Crowbar guy spits on the ground and heads back toward the shed. I take that as my cue to leave, but as I'm sneaking back toward the exit, I see something that makes my stomach drop even further. Behind one of the other boxcars, there's a pile of stuff, clothes, shoes, backpacks. All of it looks like it belonged to different people. That's when it hits me. This isn't just some random crime scene. These guys are running some kind of trafficking operation, and I just walked straight into it. I managed to make it out of the factory and back to my truck without them noticing. I peel out of there so fast I almost crash into a ditch. The second I get into town and have signal, I call the cops and tell them everything. Here's the messed up part. When they went to check it out, the place was empty. No guys, no body, nothing. It's like they packed up and disappeared the second I left. The cops told me they'd look into it, but I never heard back. I still check the news sometimes to see if anything ever comes up, but so far, nothing. All I know is that I got way too close to something I wasn't supposed to see, and it's probably only because I kept my mouth shut and stayed hidden that I'm even alive. If you're into exploring abandoned places, just don't, or at least don't go alone. You never know what or who you're gonna run into. And if you think these places are just empty and forgotten, think again. Sometimes people don't want to be found, and they'll do whatever it takes to stay hidden. I've been debating whether to share this because it still freaks me out, but maybe this'll keep someone else from doing something stupid like I did. I'm into urban exploring, not for the clout or anything, I just think old places are cool. I know, total red flag, but whatever. This happened last summer. I was visiting Maine to check out the coast and all the forests up there. Anyway, I heard about this old abandoned paper mill out in the woods. I'm not going to say exactly where because, trust me, you do not want to go there. Let's just say it was way up north, like middle of nowhere, Maine. I drove out there one afternoon, and it was already sketchy as hell. The road to the mill was this overgrown dirt path, and I had no cell service. But the place looked cool. Huge crumbling buildings with broken windows and rusted pipes everywhere. It was giving full-on post-apocalypse vibes. So, I park my car on the side of the road, grab my flashlight and camera, and start walking in. The closer I get, the creepier it feels. It's dead silent except for the wind and some birds. No cars, no signs of people. Just me and this massive abandoned factory. When I get inside, it's even worse. The air smells like metals and chemicals, and the floor's covered in old paper scraps and broken glass. There are giant machines everywhere, rusted to hell, and graffiti all over the walls. Some of it's cool, but most of it's just random names and tags. At first, I'm just taking pictures and exploring, but after a while, I start to notice weird stuff. Like there's trash that looks new, empty water bottles, food wrappers, even cigarette butts. Not something you'd expect in a place that's supposed to be abandoned. Then I find this staircase leading down to what I guess was the basement. It's dark as hell, but of course I decide to check it out because I'm an idiot. The basement's huge and it smells even worse, like chemicals and mold. I'm shining my flashlight around when I see these barrels stacked against the wall. They're not old and rusted like everything else, they're clean and new. That's when I realize this place isn't as abandoned as I thought. But it gets worse. In the corner, there's this makeshift table with all kinds of stuff on it. Plastic bags, scales, and what looks like powder spilled everywhere. My brain's still catching up when I hear it. Voices. I freeze, turn off my flashlight, and crouch behind one of the barrels. The voices are getting louder, and I can hear footsteps on the stairs. Two guys walk into the basement, and they're not messing around. They've got guns strapped to their sides, and they're carrying these big duffel bags. One of them dumps the bags on the table and says, "We need to finish this batch tonight." At this point, I'm trying not to panic. I can't move or they'll see me, and I can't stay because, well, guns. They start working, and I realize they're packaging drugs. Like a lot of drugs. There are bricks of powder wrapped in plastic, and they're dividing it into smaller bags. One of them says something about a shipment going out the next morning, and the other one laughs and says, "Good thing this place is in the middle of nowhere." No joke. I felt like my heart was going to explode. I knew if they found me, I wasn't walking out of there. I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do when my phone vibrates. It's an alarm I forgot to turn off, and it's not even on silent. The sound is so loud in the silence that both guys stop what they're doing. One of them says, "Did you hear that?" I'm full on panicking now. I shove my phone into my pocket, trying to silence it, but it's too late. One of the guys grabs a flashlight and starts looking around. I'm stuck behind the barrels, and I know if he comes around, he's going to see me. So, I do the dumbest thing ever. I grab a rock from the floor and throw it as hard as I can toward the other side of the basement. It hits something metal, and the noise makes both guys turn. One of them shouts, "Who's there?" And they both head toward the noise, guns out. I don't think, I just run. I sprint up the stairs and through the factory, trying not to trip over all the junk on the floor. Behind me, I hear them shouting, and then a gunshot. I don't know if they were shooting at me or just trying to scare me, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. When I get outside, I don't even look back. I run straight to my car, jump in, and peel out of there like my life depends on it, because it probably does. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away and finally got a signal. I thought about calling the cops, but honestly, I was too scared. What if those guys found out it was me? What if they came after me? I still think about that day all the time. Like, what if my car hadn't started? Or what if I'd made more noise? I don't even want to think about what could have happened.
With us, my friend. We are leaving.